Asia Pacific. Good evening, North America, and good morning, Asia Pacific area. My name is William Wei. I'm a professor here based in Edmonton, Alberta, with MacEwan University. And also I'm the president of HKCBA, Hong Kong Canada Business Association, Edmonton chapter. And on behalf of HKCBA, I would like to welcome our 4 speakers today, both coming from Canada and also from China mainland, and also from Hong Kong, and also the audience for today's webinar. Before I started the formal program, please allow me to introduce a little bit HKCBA, who provided this platform for us to discuss the cultural and business opportunities among Canada and Asia Pacific through Hong Kong. HKCBA is a pillar in supporting the commercial relationship between Canada and Hong Kong, as well as throughout Asia. Founded in 1984, HKCBA is one of Canada's largest nonprofit and non-governmental trade association, with over 1,000 members across 8 Canadian major cities. And this organization strives to strive Canadian firms with crucial market intelligence and also important connections through a partnership with the bigger Hong Kong family of organizations representing different government agencies in Canada and in Hong Kong, and also business communities, including, for example, the famous Cathay Pacific Airway and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, and also Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. Today's webinar is organized by HKCBA Edmonton section and also Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. And we are going to discuss and highlight the business and cultural exchange opportunities among Canada and Asia through Hong Kong and mainland China. And we have top business experts will discuss their experience for the past 3 years, particularly during the COVID time. And a lot of them actually coming from Canada originally and now working in Asia Pacific. And on the contrary, from the Canadian side, we also invited one of the community leaders and a professor to talk about Chinese Canadians and Canadians with Asian heritage working in Canada. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Mark Ceolin. He is the founding chairman of Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. And he has lived and worked in China for almost 15 years. And during the whole time, he has been a key supporter of Canadian business communities across China and Asia and also in Hong Kong. So Mark established and became the president of Redgate International, a very successful PR and marketing company in 2005. The company has operations in Shanghai, Toronto, and Singapore, and engaged in brand promotion through events and media, especially in mainland China. And Redgate just released a masterpiece, several of them. One is focused on China's 4 Dreams Olympic Games, and the other is talking about specifically Canadian diasporas working and cultural exchange and bringing business opportunities to Asia Pacific. He is a native of Windsor, Ontario, and graduated with a PhD degree from University of Toronto. So I will welcome Dr. Mark Ceolin to start his sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you for that introduction. And good morning and good evening to everybody. I'm presently in Shanghai, so I'm being transmitted from Shanghai, where it's morning on Tuesday morning. And I'm delighted to take part in this conversation. As William said, I've been in China a long time. I've been located in Shanghai for 18 years now. So a native of Windsor, become a Torontonian. I'm one of those Canadian business people that came to China and found opportunity and created opportunity and transmitted opportunity and worked with synergies over all these years. And here I still am. The last couple of years have been challenging with the international pandemic. And so there are issues that are relevant to all business, also Canadian business, but a lot of businesses everywhere, particularly businesses that require travel, anything that's travel related. I wear several hats. I am as William said, I'm the president of a PR marketing firm, and we set up shop here in Shanghai in 2005. So that's already 16 years. We also have office in Singapore and Toronto, as William said, and we work a lot with large international corporations, commercial entities, government, Canadian government. We promote Canada in China and in the Asia Pacific region, particularly in ASEAN. So we've done all kinds of things, including promoting Ontario tourism, promoting the province of Ontario across Vietnam. And certainly I've hosted, in the 18 years that I've been in China, I've hosted many delegations, both at the federal level, provincial and municipal, of mayors, premiers and prime ministers, and also governor generals to China. So I have a long-term view. I'm one of those Canadians with an inside long-term view of China. So that's one hat I wear. The other hat I wear is I'm the founding chairman of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, but I'm presently the chairman of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. And we are the preeminent on-the-ground Canadian business organization in China. We have been present in a variety of forms since the 90s. And we registered as the Canadian Chamber in 2008. So now it's 13 years that we've been very active promoting Canadian concerns in China and promoting trade and cultural ties between Canada and China. So I find myself in the unique situation where I do have a view from both sides about what works and what doesn't work, and the opportunities that exist. I'm always interested in following the media back home, and it strikes me sometimes that more information is a good thing, especially from Canadians who are on the ground in China, who understand the opportunities that exist and the importance of China as Canada's second largest trading partner, and the opportunities that that provides as well. So the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has hundreds of members, including some of our largest corporations, including Air Canada itself. Off the top of my head, IMAX, Manulife, et cetera. We have a lot of the manufacturers, a lot of the financial institutions. And of course, because Canada's business community is largely SMEs, we also represent a large number of SMEs here in China, people like myself who have set up business in China and are doing quite well. So that's a general introduction. Since we're talking about these 3 years, have seen changes in policy. They have seen the effects of COVID, and business has been somewhat more difficult. However, I can clearly state, especially as a result of recent roundtables that I've conducted with our own membership, that Canadian business is committed to continuing to work in China. There are a lot of opportunities, and there are some people involved in this conversation who can speak to those opportunities in particular industries. But across the board, I do not see Canadian business that has invested here in China, especially over a number of years. I do not see them looking for an exit strategy. As a matter of fact, we're looking to engage even more deeply and looking for more opportunities and rolling with the changes and maintaining our presence. And there are companies that are expanding during these times. So I think that's maybe my opening statement, and maybe I'll leave it at that, and we can continue the conversation later.
Thank you, Dr. Ceolin. I have a quick section on the education exchange. I remember the other time you talk about big events in Shanghai. Celebrating students from China will going to Canada to study, and also alumni graduated from Canadian institutions based in Shanghai and Hong Kong. So what is the situation like in the international education exchange, particularly students coming from China to study in Canada? Because I'm in the post-secondary, there are some concerns that we have a reducing number of students coming from China, but eventually I see maybe the trend is not that so negative. We still have a lot of student interest coming from the Chinese side, coming to Canada to study. Can you comment or give us some of the insight on that? Thank you.
Yes, there's a lot of focus this year in particular on our Canadian alumni residing in China, because alumni and Chinese student leaders who are going to school in Canada, and there is a large number of them. So the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has been working together with the Canadian Consulate in Shanghai, and our government in general is focusing on supporting our alumni here in China. So there have been a number of events recently. There will be one tomorrow, as a matter of fact, where we're interacting with our alumni, letting them know how we are here to support them and looking to tap into those to potential business opportunities as well with what we call Canadian brand ambassadors. So Chinese students who have graduated from Canadian universities and have returned to China. There are young ones, there are older ones, and many of them are professional, and they work in very important places, including in government. And so to focus on maintaining our relations and the goodwill that we've developed with these Canadian brand ambassadors is something that we are looking into. And we've hosted, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce hosted a roundtable earlier this year where we brought together alumni representatives from some of our Canadian universities who represent the elite alumni leaders here in China. And we invited them, and we also invited some of the presidents of the Chinese undergraduate student associations at some of our Canadian universities to sit together at a table and discuss the value of Canadian education, the importance of coming together to discuss what we have in common. There doesn't seem to be any hesitation for Chinese students to go to Canada to school. As a matter of fact, it is a country of choice. Canada is safe. Canada has rule of law. Canada has an excellent education system, and this is recognized here in China. So we just saw off, there was a China-Canada student forum in June recently, where we had several hundred students who were about to embark from China to Canada to go back to school, and they came together under the banner, the Canada-China banner, recognizing that, recognizing the importance and the value of a Canadian education. And at that time, we brought together some Canadian business leaders and leaders from Canadian industry, including Tim Hortons, IMAX, B&H Architects. They were present these people were present to speak about business opportunities in China, working for Canadian brands, and also the value of a Canadian education and getting a good job back here in China. So everything that we've been seeing is positive, and we are engaging with our alumni and with the students who are presently at school in Canada. So there's a lot of good things happening right now, and a lot of opportunity to engage in that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for your sharing, Dr. Ceolin. So I will move to our next speaker, Mr. Matt Whitley. And he was originally coming from Ottawa, Canada. And he studied history and political science at University of Ottawa and graduating with honors. After gaining experience in the public sector, Matt moved to the private sector before relocating to Shanghai in 2012. As an educator, Matt soon found a sports gear and apparel sourcing company and been working there since 2012. And then in 2015, he co-founded a creative tech agency In 2019, Matt joined the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai as the deputy director. And in 2020, he was named executive director in the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. And Matt now puts his efforts towards supporting the Canadian business communities throughout China. So Mike, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wei. I really appreciate that introduction. Hello, everyone, and good morning, good evening, wherever you are in this great, vast world of ours. Greetings from here in Shanghai. As mentioned, my name is Matt. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce here in Shanghai. And I think that as a way of introduction, I think that we're talking about China, opportunities in China and cross-cultural and cross-business exchanges with Canada. And I think that I myself just sort of exemplify sort of the opportunities that are present in such an exchange. Hailing from Ottawa, it's largely a government town. And normally, if you stay in Ottawa, you tend to work for the federal government in some sort of capacity. And that was a fantastic experience. But going beyond that, I relocated to Shanghai and immediately started sort of just teaching English as a means to get the foot in the door, kind of understand what's going on here, what's in the market, because we talk about China as we talk about mainland China as sort of one entity, but really it's a collection of different provinces, different cultures, different things that are just very open to us as long as we explore them. And so taking the time to kind of see what's here on the ground, actually, I was able to start not only one business, but two businesses in very different manners. One was a trading company, one was a tech agency, and having the experience of running both of those here in Shanghai, it was a fantastic experience. It's something that I really couldn't have done back in Canada with the resources required and the flexibility that was generally offered. So these are these sorts of opportunities that are sort of omnipresent here, and I think that now that I'm with the Chamber of Commerce, I'm able to kind of highlight these opportunities for others and kind of help push Canadian business in certain directions and support Canadian business, I should say, and also cultural exchanges, of course. So there's a lot of these opportunities that are still present. The Olympics is an example that's coming up. It's happening in Beijing in February, and there are Canadians that are involved in this from the lead up all the way through to the actual Olympics itself. I think one of the greatest examples we can kind of give is that a Canadian company, CTC Ice and Snow, was actually responsible for helping build the speed skating oval in Beijing, right? So it's Canadian know-how, Canadian technology being instilled into these games quite fundamentally, right down to ice conditions. And this is something that we excel in as Canadians, and we were able to help exchange with our Chinese counterparts. In the lead up to it, we have had many Canadian community outreach across China, in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Guangzhou, everywhere across China. We've had a lot of coaches, actually just sport coaches. So people came over and they dedicated their time, their energies, their efforts to teaching sport at the grassroots level. We're talking hockey, we're talking speed skating, figure skating, any sort of skiing, snowboarding. These are all sort of sports that a large amount of Canadians have dedicated their time and efforts to growing these sports over the past 10 years. right? So it's not just because of the Olympics, but it's definitely a linchpin for it. And beyond this, we have a lot of Canadian companies that are here, that are based here in in China, especially in Beijing, that are looking to capitalize on a lot of the things that revolve around the Olympics, right? So we're working on things like Hockey House, and these sorts of ideas where we can kind of gather and have a cross-cultural exchange for anyone, for all the different countries that are facing off in the Olympic Games. And these are these sorts of ideas and realities that are here and present. And so from a micro level, it's quite exciting to see all of these opportunities that people are really taking advantage of. And from a macro level, to echo our chair, Dr. Mark Ceolin, the opportunities abound, and they're not really going anywhere. In fact, they're increasing. We've had is no question that we've had a little bit of a rocky road over the past sort of 3 years, given the health pandemic, given diplomatic issues between our countries. But in that time and in that space, it's quite interesting to note that on the macro level, trade is up, and it's been up every year. It's constantly improved, constantly got better. Foreign direct investment is up. It's up every year. Total investments is up. It's up every year. And so, in fact, right now is the best trading period we've ever had between our countries. So, we have to really keep that in mind and keep having a long-term view of this, because when we look into the past and we compare the data with what the data is today, it's a very different picture than, for example, what socially or through the media we see. It's quite interesting to note that dichotomy, and to be able to kind of go back against that. And it's only increasing. We have more companies that are looking to come into the market. We have more companies that are expanding the reach here. We're talking consumer goods, we're talking agriculture, we're talking a vast, cross section of industries. And so it is quite interesting being here in the middle of all that and really seeing what's happening on the ground, and being able to connect with back home with Canada and try to bring these opportunities for win-win situations all around. So I guess that's where I'll stop on my introduction, but thank you very much for having me speak today.
Can I jump in for 1 second? Is that
Yes,
allowed?
thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
I just thought of something else that Matt could maybe mention. So recently here in Shanghai, the Chinese government hosted the CIIE, the China International Import Expo. And that is a very, very big event indeed for foreign countries that want to export their goods and services to China. And so a lot of our members and a lot of Canadian companies presented themselves at this import expo, and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce participated in hosting an opening event, and Matt was very much a part of that. Matt, maybe you can give a few of the details of the numbers alone of Canadian companies that are looking to enter the China market at a time when people are talking about entering the China market. We're actually seeing people fighting to get into China, to enter the China market. Matt, can you?
Actually, well, yes, it's a good point. I was trying to be a little bit humble, but actually 76 Canadian companies came from Canada to attend CIIE in Shanghai this year, the China International Import Expo, which is in fact the best number we have ever had for this expo. It started 4 years ago. There was a small but dedicated delegation that came. Over the past 2 years, it has grown, but not exponentially. And then this year, despite the pandemic, despite the fact that coming into the mainland, you require 3 weeks of quarantine, we still had 76 companies from Canada, based in Canada, that decided to come to Shanghai and put down some roots, put down feet on the ground, pass out the business cards and really get into the market. And I think that it's a fantastic number. It's a fantastic, and the fact that it has grown year on year, every year, is a great sort of indication of the actual practical nature of Canadian companies looking to do business here. And on the other side of that, we're also seeing a large sort of swell of Chinese companies that are approaching Canadian entities that are looking to do business with Canada in a cross section of fields, in medical, in agriculture, in IT. And we're really we're fielding even more calls from the Chinese side saying that we would like to work with Canadians, as Canadian companies specifically, on these items. So it's a very interesting and exciting time for all of this.
Thank you, Mr. Matt Whitley. Thanks for the sharing. And I do have a question on the Winter Olympics. You're talking about the big Canadian firms, particularly in the specialized in the Winter Olympic sports management, going to China using technology, helping with the facilities, training the athletes. My question is, do you identify some of the smaller enterprises also in those sectors like sports, winter games, also entering Chinese market?
Yes, we do. In fact, a rising tide floats all boats. So it's not necessarily just the large companies that are gaining from this. We see startups, we see small companies, we're seeing event activations for education companies that are leveraging the Olympics. Right? It is very open. It's very the opportunities are there, and they are being kind of taken on by a lot of these Canadian companies. So it's across a vast number of industries. Small companies, medium-sized companies, large companies. I think that the Olympics itself is a time to celebrate sport. It's time to celebrate competition, and I think that Canadians are very good, especially at the Winter Olympics. So it's an opportunity for us to not only compete but also to help and have this cultural exchange and also business exchanges that are born out of all of this.
If I can contribute a little bit to that, not specifically about small Canadian companies, but generally here in China. Interestingly, because my company Redgate, we work with some of the international sports brands, for example, the North Face, Nike, some of these brands. And we've noticed there's been an incredible growth in outdoor sports enthusiasm in China during COVID. So it's during COVID that people in China are focusing on developing outdoor lifestyles. And the Olympics has a lot to do with that. So the drive to the Winter Olympics in Beijing is driving, as Matt said, floating all boats, because it's driving a lot of attention towards winter sports in general. And winter sports require winter apparel, outerwear, training, teaching, facilities. And a lot, not only Canadians, but also Canadians are involved. I, as a Canadian, am in fact involved in promoting sports brands, outdoor apparel for winter, and ski wear, hiking wear, anything that you need to put on to go to an ice rink. It's a drive. There's a transformation in the population here with this new interest in winter sports and outdoor activities. So that is definitely something driving the market, and there are Canadians participating. I mean, just looking at some of the Canadian brands here that are activewear, and this is it's a very niche, it's not niche, it's a big market, but you look at, Arc'teryx. Arc'teryx has recently been purchased by Anta, and Arc'teryx is doing quite well here in China. Canada Goose is outerwear, and they position themselves quite well, particularly in the big tier cities, the first tier cities. So they're in Beijing, and there are activations for outerwear. And when people go to the Olympics, they'll probably have to put on a parka. So these kinds of things are driving Canadian brands. Lululemon is here. Lululemon is not known primarily as outdoor sports, but sports in general. the market is changing, and there is a recognition of the value of engaging with the outdoors, and that's kind of a Canadian thing. So there are opportunities there, which we still haven't even understood. So those who are here, myself included, I have the opportunity to promote those activities through my company. So we do activations, we do events, we do videos, these sorts of things. So that's in some way an opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Ceolin. So I will move to our third speaker, Ms. Katharina Su. She holds a Bachelor of Arts, Architectural Studies, and also Master of Architects. And also she's a member of the Hong Kong Institute of Architects. And Catherine has been working in the industry for more than 20 years. She joined B&H in 2013 and now serves as Executive Principal Asia Pacific area. And she's based in Hong Kong. She's responsible for leading the business development efforts in the whole region and directing ongoing projects in the Hong Kong office and Hong Kong studio. Catherine's extensive past experience spans from office, retail, hotel, residential, and institutional sectors, including working for numerous high-profile clients, such as Walt Disney, New World, China Merchants Bank, Wanda Group, Shimo, and OCT. Catherine's unique combination of business development, project management, and design skills well equipped her for her role in driving the growth and the development of the Hong Kong office and also the greater Chinese business. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Wei, for the brief introduction, and thank you, Mark, for having me here for this webinar. So just when Mark noted about the outdoor lifestyle since pandemic, I just want to share a little note about Hong Kong, because we all live in a very small habitation. And ever since pandemic, there's a lot of restriction of traveling, and the Catalan has been doing very well. Everyone has a tent, and in the weekend, people have been pitching their tent in like Sai Kung or the Hong Kong Public Park. And Hong Kong people were not known to be that outdoorsy, but I think that the pandemic has changed our lifestyles tremendously. So this is some interesting remarks that I'd like to share with all of you. Just coming back, my background, I'm coming from the construction business, and architectural design is really related to construction business and real estate, which actually ties in many different parts of the economy. We are almost like the radar when we talk to the developers. We know, when the economy is down, the first thing to go is architecture. People don't have money, they don't have financing, and then project will stop. But surprisingly, in the last couple of years, we don't see a major slowdown just because of the pandemic. But on the contrary, we do see the shift of the market trend coming from maybe less so on residential, moving towards more on some other structural changes like healthcare or like commercial, and also R&D institutional developments. So I like to share a little bit of the finding or the little bit business insight from my part. I've been working with a lot of Chinese clients actually. So my clientele are not only limited to Hong Kong, Macau, but a lot of them actually Chinese company. Some of them are state-owned, some of them are private. Evergrande is one of my major clients. I would say they're one of my anchor clients. And I also witnessed firsthand like the rise and fall in the last 10 plus years. So just moving back, maybe I like to talk a little bit. The first part is about the construction business and the building industry and how it affects in the last couple of years, and then going forward, what will be the opportunities. But also I like to share with you a little bit of the findings that I found from the government website about the foreign investment coming into China, and that the policy of how much opportunity they're open to foreign investment in the coming years. So for the first part about the building industry, I would like to share with you that the trend has been shifting from primary residential. So, I mean, we all witnessed a little bit of the dampening of the domestic economy because of the building industry. And the government put out the 3 red lines. They trying to balance off the extreme rich versus the extreme poor by controlling the real estate markets. So it is true that we do not see as many projects in the last couple of years because of the government policy controlling the financing and the land banks. And so, well, there's no land, there's not a lot of many projects. So we, on that end, we could see that there's effect, and according to the government data, the growth have been in the third quarter has dropped almost close to the 5% growth compared with the previous year. And then in fact, in the fourth quarter, they're looking, the growth rate will be less than, maybe drop below 4%. So we could see the real estate market will affect many different industry, including building materials, like, you know, we know there's a lot of supply from overseas in terms of building materials. And then of course, the people's GDP feeling that the earning has been diminished. So it also affects and have some knock-on effect, let's put it this way. But on the other hand, we also see that the government is they don't want to dampen it too much they worry that it may affect too much, so they're going to like relax a little bit. I heard the news that they're going to relax the financing, they relax the foreign exchange by maybe end of this year or early January next year. So that's good news. So we're hoping in 2022 maybe it will not be, the real estate will not be predominant in the last like in the last 10 years, but there will be a slight crawling back up in 2022. But how does it translate with foreign exchange investment or international investment? I'd like to pull out my article. Sorry, just let me quickly. So this is something that I read from the government official website, and the policy that they're going to put out to attract 700 billions of US dollars into China. And in fact, surprisingly, in the last couple of years, as like Mark or Matt and Dr. Wei is mentioning, that in fact there has been growth of foreign investment. There's been a lot more interest coming into China, and we also hopefully hoping that we can leverage off with these foreign investment firms coming into China, and being a Canadian design firm that we can tap into the market or work with them to develop their project. That definitely at certain sectors are particularly welcomed to China. Anything related to high tech and sustainability, environmental, and that's kind of like a new an industry that requires a lot of knowledge base. So these are all highly welcome and by Chinese government. And I mean, even like retail, some of the big company like Lego, they are planning to increase their store from 60 plus to over 300 all over China in the next couple of years. So you can see this the faith and the growth in China is still very strong, you know, coming from other countries. And in fact, there's also, as I mentioned earlier, the sustainability, environmental business, green business are going to be the core new infrastructure that Chinese government welcome the foreign investment coming in to support their growth, but as well as their financial institution, the modern logistic and management company, information technology, and also like some service industry like healthcare, health related, elderly care, travel, and those kind of industry, and anything related to R&D. That's also going to be highly motivated Chinese government to introduce them into introduce those foreign firms into China. And there have been actually a lot of growth in the last couple of years, and just tech alone is this year has grown by 33.4% in the last 9 months. And I mean, like, one of our clients, AstraZeneca, they also have been increasing their investment, and right now, their Shanghai headquarters is actually done by our BFSH office, Shanghai office, and right now they have the R&D projects over 120, and in fact they have increased the amount of research projects by 85% in the last year. In fact, they are going to moving toward and expanding the research in AI and medical analysis, bioanalysis, all on the ground in China. So you can see there's a lot of opportunities for Canadian firms who are expertise in those kind of tech area coming into China. There's a lots of opportunity. Not to mention telecommunication, education, cultural. As we know, China is trying to demonopolize those telecommunication companies. So I also see maybe there's a big potential for, internet companies. So there I can also see there's a lot of opportunities for these new internet companies coming into the market to compete with Alibaba and Tencent and so forth. I also read about Chinese government is going to provide a healthier and safer environments for the foreign investors to protect the right to make sure they do not feel they're trying to increase the openness and the transparency of the system, so to make it a safer and a durable environment for foreign investors. So I do see in the big potential, and going forward, China still had a lot of potential in areas for investments to come. So that's just a little sharing that I like to share some good news and positive notes with all of you.
Thank you, Katharina. A quick question coming from my side is the role of Hong Kong in the long term. Obviously, Hong Kong used to be a very great and key strategic place between as a bridging between West and East, particularly advanced economies and also mainland China and Asia, throughout Asia. So there's also a kind of initiative around Hong Kong, which is looking at the Hong Kong, Macau, Guangdong, Greater Bay Areas. Yeah, so companies like Canadian companies based in Hong Kong reaching out to the greater, either Greater China areas. Do you see a kind of diminished role of Hong Kong, or a more important increasing role of Hong Kong as your regional head office? And if yes, Hong Kong is still very important, and in what role Hong Kong play in the future? Thank you.
Well, Hong Kong is still Hong Kong, and Hong Kong has I think one of the key I would say competitive edge against the Greater Bay Area, within the Greater Bay Area, is still the talents and it's the people. So I think Hong Kong has a very well-established financial system and structure, and also as well as Hong Kong has a very good it's a very key transportation hub. So it has been a bit. I think it's been holding Hong Kong back because of the pandemic, because of the travel restriction. And I think in the next couple of months, I'm hoping Hong Kong will have more clarity about the traveling restriction policy. Because they either want to sync up with the Chinese border or Chinese policy, so that there's become no border between Hong Kong and, say, at least crossing over to Shenzhen and Macau, or they should be totally open like Singapore and live with COVID and just separate itself from China, and to be a little bit of the semi-detached from Chinese border, but run a very different policy. So I think in the next couple months, I'm hoping Chinese government, Hong Kong government will take a stand either way, rather than in the nimble. Now we're neither nor. We're trying to stick with the Chinese policy but then we're not allowed to go into China freely like all the other Chinese cities. Right. On the other hand, we are kind of having like one of the most stringent COVID quarantine restrictions in the world, 21 days for a lot of foreign visitors. So I think in terms of Hong Kong's current position, I would say is a little bit unclear. But in the long term, Hong Kong, Macau, Shenzhen, the Greater Bay Area, I still see Hong Kong will still play a very important role or leading role. And I know Shenzhen government is putting out a lot of incentives trying to attract people from Hong Kong or cross-border to live and work there, because as much as the infrastructure they provide in Shenzhen, they're building millions of square meters of infrastructure, but they only have the hardware. They need the software. They need the people to run it. So Hong Kong is still going to play a very important role to supply the talents and the brain and the management.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
I do agree with you. The key competitiveness of Hong Kong is the people, right? The talents over in Hong Kong, 7 million people. And I heard stories like, for example, although some of the business people working in mainland China across the border every morning, you will see kids. Their kids actually go back to Hong Kong to join a kindergarten, primary school. You have a line of all the kids moving back to attend schools in Hong Kong. So that gives the attraction of Hong Kong as a regional hub for all of these advantages comparable with mainland China. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the three Canadian diasporas talking about their experience in mainland and also in Hong Kong. So we welcome our last speaker, Dr. Gina Wang. She is a full professor with Athabasca University here in Edmonton, Alberta, and also one of the international bestseller author, and also a global thinker and speaker, a consultant who has been working with clinics for hundreds of individuals for the past 2 decades. And she has supported women and individuals from a life course perspective to shifting negative intergenerational patterns and predicting a legacy of change for future generation. She was the founder and also ambassador with the Asian Gold Rainbow campaign, which started in March 2021, and the Asian Mental Health Collective in Canada starting in January 2022, actually not far away next year, which the organization actually started up Asian mental health services in Canada and abroad to fight against anti-Asian racism here in Canada, and also instill pride in being people with Asian heritage. So I will leave the floor to Dr. Gina Wang. Thank you.
So much. Thank you, Dr. Wei, and thank you for having me. It's such a privilege for me to be on such an esteemed panel with everyone. And I feel such hope listening to what you have to share and what it's like around there where you are. So thank you for sharing that. You know, I'm thinking about what I wanted to talk about with bridging Canadian and Asian Pacific cultural and business exchanges. You know, from my mental health perspective, you know, I think that there is a lot of cross coalitions that can be built and need to be built. And I know that there are a lot. And so what I want to share with you is what I have been doing this year. That kind of came as a complete surprise to me, because as an academic, I don't know very much about nonprofit organizations and charities and all those kinds of things, but you know, passion brings you to do things, I guess, that you're not familiar with so much. So I've learned a lot over this year. So what I want to discuss is the importance of raising Asian cultural pride and the awareness of mental health crises that are affecting Chinese individuals, families, communities, and organizations. So right now, today I checked, worldwide, 275 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 have been reported. And anti-Asian racism is the secondary epidemic that has resulted. Let me just see if my slides are gonna, there we go. So this is not going to be an unfamiliar sight to you. Lots of the rallies that have happened that anti-Asian racism has inspired. And so the importance of looking at how mental health has been affected for Asian communities globally, and it really is staggering. So I'm a psychologist, and as Dr. Wei talked about, I'm also a professor. I'm a Chinese woman. I'm Canadian born, so I was born in Montreal. And I endured significant racism growing up in Montreal. And when the racism that was happening in association with the coronavirus to Chinese individuals, I thought about my children, I thought about my daughters, and not wanting them to grow up with the same kind of racism that I experienced. And in fact, legislated institutionalized racism from the 19th century. So I felt that this next generation of youth really deserved to feel valued for who they are and to feel cultural pride. There is a study by the Canadian Chinese National Council of Toronto that found that East Asians accounted for 84% of the reported cases of anti-Asian racism in Canada. And so this campaign I felt was so important to contribute to an Asian movement fighting racial intolerance. And we know that it's not just with Asians, that we live in a world right now with such political, racial strife. So, you know, the division among so many topics is really quite devastating right now. So speaking about my own experiences, like I talked about, you know, I think many Chinese individuals would also have the same experiences of being belittled, ignored, shunned. In my youth, I was kicked, chased, spit at in elementary school. You know, and these experiences have really taught me, trained and socialized me to stay quiet and to not speak out and to stay invisible to survive. So the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign was really in the face of all of that. You know, I felt very much that I needed to raise my voice, that we needed visible solidarity against anti-Asian racism and against the Cantonese word yun, which is pride and staying quiet and humble and silent, that this new generation requires us to stand up and speak out and be strong and to be models of that for them. So I enlisted my co-founder, Sheila Wong from Toronto, and we involved ambassadors because Asian youth, of course, is very important to the mission. So the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign, galvanizing individuals, communities, and organizations to stand in visible solidarity against anti-Asian racism. And so to really, you know, talk about the history that Chinese people have been through, what does support healing and to raise our voices? How do we do that? How do we maintain this momentum of an Asian movement of pride and solidarity? And now felt to be the time. It was in March, right around the time of the Atlanta shootings of 6 Asian women. And I was in front of media doing some work with my university and found myself sharing my own experiences of racism. And that's when I was inspired to do this work. So what we did was we designed gold ribbons, Asian gold ribbon to kind of symbolize the pride in Asian culture. So we worked with a mask company. We also taught people how to make this canary shape of the gold ribbon to wear with pride. And because of COVID and our inability to distribute, we had videos about how to make your own ribbon. Here's the video. I will not show it, but it was incredible, the reach that we had. My daughter designed this Asian gold ribbon pin at the top. It's moon over crane. And for businesses, we had our Asian gold ribbon lapel pin, as you can see here. And then we also had our educational modules. So Mr. Yi here, the grandfather of one of our youth ambassadors, they talked to each other, and he talked about what it was like to come to Canada, what the head tax was like. And so we have a variety of educational modules that other organizations have taken up. And in May, during Asian Heritage Month, we showcased a lot of these videos, and they were also shared by other organizations. And the feature really was this Asian Gold Ribbon Day, which the inaugural Asian Gold Ribbon Day on May 20th of 2021 was a huge success. I'm very proud to say the first event was this Let's Talk webinar, and we had the Human Rights Commissioner of Canada involved, the Minister of Diversity, Inclusivity and Youth, as well as Deputy Minister Daniel Kwan-Watson for Indigenous Crown Relations, followed up by our East Asian Youth Summit, where we talked to our youth about the topics and issues that were relevant for them and came up with 4 calls to action, and again involved government officials and individuals as part of this panel on Asian Gold Ribbon Day. We also had the Toronto sign, the CN Tower, the exhibition gates and Niagara Falls lit up in gold on Asian Gold Ribbon Day. So it was phenomenal. In fact, the turnout was incredible. And what our analytics showed, and I think it's because the need was so much there. So we reached 31.2 million people across 80 countries with 33 media pieces. And people like Samuel L. Jackson, Andrew Fung wore our masks. We had a lot of engagement on social media because, again, of COVID, our campaign, our visibility campaign was on social media. And just on Saturday, this book that I was involved with, where I talk about doing this kind of work, having been in my own academic bubble and not really ever doing this sort of work, and what that took in this book, Moms Who Boss Up, was and is an international bestseller on Amazon. So I'm very proud of that. And what we're turning to now is we've been invited by the Asian Mental Health Collective in the United States to be part of them and form an Asian Mental Health Collective in Canada. So we're very thrilled to do that, and we're kind of working out the details around that. But it is so important because race-related traumatic stress has a huge impact. So things like cortisol levels, decrease in cognitive focus, mental health decline, even earlier death. And what we're seeing is that there is, in fact, this pandemic. So anxiety, panic around being targeted, around being seen as the yellow peril, feelings of grief, helplessness, hopelessness, suicidality, as I said, early death, internalized racism, all those kinds of experiences are what we're facing right now. And it's not ending. In fact, it's getting worse. What we're finding and what research shows that instilling positive ethnic identity, so feeling proud in being Chinese, reduces the effects of discrimination and racism. And learning as well as speaking about historical trauma helps with healing and makes way for genesis of cultural pride and feeling greater safety and psychological well-being. And that's what the Asian Gold Ribbon campaign is founded upon. One of the things that we're planning for our Asian Gold Ribbon Day in May in 2022 is having an international forum on Asian mental health. And so we're in the process of developing this and looking for, individuals. It would be wonderful to involve China, Hong Kong, and to speak about what is the mental health effects that are happening and what's needed. How can we celebrate our resilience? When I was doing some background reading about the mental health crisis in Hong Kong, there was so much discussion about how it's going to last about 2 or 3 generations, the impact of what's been happening, the global unrest. And nearly 1 in 10 people in Hong Kong are suffering from depression. So this was a study from the University of Hong Kong, which has nearly doubled in 5 years. So there is so much, I think, that needs to be done. I know that there is a lot that has been done, talking about a mental health tsunami, and that this crisis is so apparent. And yet what we're seeing is the actual access to professional services is not happening. And so we have to think about what is the shame, what's the stigma around mental illness? Why is it that people are challenged to access professional help? How can we do our part in that and see that people are supported and helped? There was a program called Care for All, involving 50 psychiatrists who volunteered in China, but I believe that that ended in February of 2020. And I know that there are a lot of initiatives happening, and it would be wonderful to involve Canada to help and support and to mutually look at this issue and work on it together. So the silent killer of mental illness can no longer be ignored. Programs spotlighting prevention, treatment, destigmatization, and in fact, more and more open dialogue that we can have about Asian well-being is so needed. At this time of crisis, and I hear this in so many of your discussions today as well about the opportunities that it also affords. So looking at taking this time to raise awareness for issues that are and have been issues for a long time. Mental illness is not a new issue at all. And so what can we do? How can we make these cultural and business exchanges? What opportunities are there? And really looking at business leaders prioritizing impact of mental health for their organization, but also for themselves. I work with leaders and they themselves are suffering a lot. And how do we, the oxygen mask that we should don on ourselves in order to keep and sustain our organizations and our employees are so important for leaders as well. And participating, supporting community action and outreach to raise pride and celebration being Chinese. There's so much, I think, with the Beijing Olympics that's going to be possible in bringing pride in being Asian once again, and to do that in a way that is mindful to how that makes a difference for youth in talking about, being Asian and the things and, what there is, in fact, to celebrate about. So worldwide, looking at this, not just between our countries, but of course, conversations that need to be had around the globe, and looking at what kinds of biases and thoughts and beliefs that we have about ourselves and about the workplace and organizations. I know for myself, with the internalized racism that I grew up with, being an academic and finding myself in meetings and I just stepped out of an administrative role as program chair, that as an Asian, and in fact, I think being one of maybe the two of us in our faculty, what that, for me, I had to come out of in my own identity development. And this year, with everything that's happened, has been the year of the most significant growth for me in coming to a place of embracing who I am, and again, raising my voice and talking to youth and the world about what is needed. So thank you so much for letting me be part of this, and I welcome any questions.
Sorry, I was muted just now. Thank you, Dr. Wang, for sharing your research and also your initiative. It's actually very important, tracing back to what our three previous speakers talking about the business opportunity for Canadians in Asia Pacific through Hong Kong, and also important of, as a minority of, Asian heritage existing in Canada. These are actually a great asset for Canadians and also the society and the economy, in addition to our Canadian diasporas working in Asia Pacific. I think there is really a need to promote more on this, on the cultural understanding, highlights the business opportunities and also grow together. So I want to open up to the floor to speakers. If you have any comments, you have any questions, we can, do like a 10 minutes discussion on the issue coming to your mind or any comments on your mind. Thank you.
Can I raise my hand?
Yes.
Okay, I have one point that I actually would like to note about Hong Kong as a business opportunity for Canadians. I mean, one thing is that Hong Kong so long as we remained the free flow of currency. I think that that's the major edge between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, because Hong Kong still have a free flow of foreign exchange. In fact, there have been a lot of companies, Chinese companies, setting up their entity in Hong Kong. So not only we're talking about this business opportunity for like Canadians to invest in China, but there's also a lot of opportunities the other way around. There's a lot of Chinese company coming to Hong Kong, set up their entity so that they can invest in overseas, and including Canada. So that will be there's a kind of like exchange, a mechanism that we should capture these kind of opportunities within the city and in the region.
Thank you. Thanks for the sharing. And I also noticed there's a lot of Canadian passport holders working and living in Hong Kong, right?
Yes.
More than 350K. So that's a largest number. And also Hong Kong has the largest celebration of Canada Day out of North America. And I was really impressed by the, our government, like Canadian Embassy, Alberta office, provincial representative office, how they actively promoting Canadian products and interests through Hong Kong to the Asia Pacific region.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mark, you are muted. Sorry.
That being said, that's an interesting point, Catherine, about banking itself, because banking is an issue for businesses, right? And the flow of currency is obviously vital to do business. In terms of celebration of Canada, I thought I would pipe in a little bit there. And in terms, because, a lot of Canadian, even educational institutions have their China representatives located in Hong Kong. And so it's interesting that often when we're dealing with universities, Canadian universities, to talk to their alumni representatives, even the University of Toronto has their office for China located in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is not Shanghai. Hong Kong is a very different place in many ways, right? In terms of the reality. Here in Shanghai, I mean, it's true that there are more than 300,000 Canadian passport holders in Hong Kong, and there are more and more Canadian passport holders in the mainland as well. And certainly here in Shanghai, we do host a pretty big Canada Day as well. And we bring together, I mean, this year we had 1,500 people on the streets of Shanghai. So, and that's hosted together with our government, our provincial representatives, our large industry. Tim Hortons got their donuts there, and we have everything going on. So there's in terms of development of the Canadian relationship with the China mainland, there's a lot that is happening here that used to be more geared towards Hong Kong, and that's just factual. I also think I wanted to say something about identity, since Gina, you're talking essentially about identity. And so it's interesting because a lot of, I work in the cultural field here in China as well. So I've created, I've co-produced with Shanghai TV and several other regional broadcasters documentary series over the years. I've hosted street festivals, I've hosted film festivals, I've hosted fringe festivals here in China. And it's interesting because basically culture and the, it's about meaning, it's about exploring meaning as we can understand it commonly, and identity. And certainly in Canada-China collaborations, co-production, there's always the search for a message, right? So even Canada and China have a film treaty, a co-production film treaty. That's to co-produce messages or films that have meaning to both Canadians and to Chinese, right? So finding that message is something at the center of opportunity right now. And certainly that has a lot to do with identity. So I'm just throwing that out there for you, because certainly, the attempt to understand each other is a very important thing. And as businesses, we every day live in a world where we have to understand the environment that we're working in, understand our co-workers, understand our employees, understand our bosses, and it's a very interesting. It's very interesting. Just wanted to let you know that that's a focus of cultural exchange, a lot of cultural exchange opportunities between Canada and China right now.
Thanks, Mark. It really does start with identity, that intrapsychic. So within ourselves and how we see who we are and what our purpose is, and then the intra, you know, in terms of with people in our organization and how we lead and how we do things. So I'm excited to hear about that, and I'll touch base with you to hear more about this Canada-China film treaty. It sounds very interesting.
Thank you. So Matt, do you want to add something from your side? Thank you.
You know, on the question of identity, it is quite interesting because I think I just have some small thing to add to that, and that is that, you know, here in the Chamber of Commerce, we actually do employ a lot of interns that come through our chamber, and they are vital to our organization, just full stop. But you know, they are often either you know, Chinese citizens that go to Canada and are studying in Canadian universities and are kind of, you know, getting involved in Canadian culture, and then return to Shanghai for a stint and are interested in joining the chamber, or they are Canadian students that come to China and do likewise, that are you know, going into Chinese universities, educational institutions, and learning a cultural exchange on that front. And these people are deeply inspiring because they literally straddle two different cultures, two different identities. And I remember there was a post about one who was an intern at actually at Redgate, who said, you know, I was asked where I'm from, and it's actually a difficult question for me, because, you know, am I from China, where I was born? Am I from Canada, where I was raised? You know, I've done education in both countries, and it kind of comes down to that whole identity thing that kind of makes us who we are. And I think that we have to identify that there is a lot of room for growth for that, and that, you know, as we work in this cross-cultural exchange, that these are the questions that we will also have to ask ourselves, right, as we go. So it is very interesting to have this as part of the conversation, and I really appreciate being able to talk to that.
Thank you for all the speakers. So I think look at the time. I think we are good on time, and if anybody want to address more issues, please feel free to do so. And if not, I hope we can continue with the conversation. And I want to thank the speakers again, and also the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. And hopefully we can work together to promote more Canadian interest in Hong Kong and in mainland China. I believe Canada has always have a very great reputation in the Asia Pacific area across the world. So there will be bring a lot of opportunities in terms of culture and business for Canadian companies, vice versa, for also companies coming from Asia Pacific. Thank you. Thanks
Thank you,
very much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And see
Have
you
a
next
nice
time.
day
Bye
ahead.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you.